I forget sometimes. So that's why it's okay for states to say things like, we're going to pass a mandatory mask mandate, because states have the right to pass laws regarding the health and safety and welfare of their citizens. They do. States have the right to say things like, we're not going to allow children into public school, or we're not going to allow children to live on campus in a college unless they have basic immunizations. States are allowed to do that. So the state says, no, we're not going to allow that underage abortion because we are looking out for the health of these kids. Parents have to make every other health decision for their kid. Why not this one? So Peyton here is going to sue, and she's going to say that this is interfering with my liberty interests. I have the right to control my own body. And Michigan says, nope, sorry, you don't. So now, what's Peyton's only option? Once you get to the Michigan Supreme Court, where can you go to complain in the United States?
The Supreme Court, correct? U.S.?
Yes, if you can try. And here's the fun thing about the U.S. Supreme Court. They don't have to hear your case. They have what's known as the writ of certiorari, which means they have the right to say, no, we don't want to hear it, or yes, send the record up, the writ of certiorari, send it up and we'll review it. If the Supreme Court says, we don't want to hear it, and Peyton here's living in Michigan, what happens to Peyton's abortion?
She can either cross lines or she can go a back way.
Well, sure, she can always do
Or
that,
she doesn't get one.
of course. She could try to cross state lines, perhaps, or if she can't get out of Michigan, maybe she lives up in the little peninsula up there in Mackinac. Maybe she can't get out. Maybe she can't get out. She's stuck. She's going to have the baby, right?
Correct.
What happens if the Supreme Court says, because it's not, I mean, think about it, guys. When we think about things like kids going here or there, these 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds being able to leave, remember, we all are, just the fact that we're all sitting here talking to us in the comfort of nice spaces on a computer with Wi-Fi, and you all are in college and I'm a college graduate, you know how privileged we are, right? Like, we are not basic everyday people already. Just the fact that we're in this little scenario right here means we've got more than a lot of people, right? You guys are aware of that, I hope. A lot of people can't just pop in the car and drive 200 miles to another state. They don't have that kind of money. They don't have that kind of access. Just keep that in mind. And I'm not calling anybody out on that. It's just, those are things I think sometimes we take for granted. Those of us who have, I don't think we really take for granted. These rules don't really hurt us. These rules hurt the have-nots, is really who they hurt. So, so let's say the Supreme Court says, okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go listen to all this. And so the Supreme Court then is only going to be able to decide the case on the basis of the federal Constitution. And they have to look for something in the U.S. Constitution that would strike down Michigan's law, And if they can't find something that strikes down Michigan's law, then, Vernie, I see your thing. I'll read it after because I can't do two things at once. I get easily distracted. If they can't strike down Michigan's law, then Michigan's law stands. Helen can't have the abortion. If they do find something in the U.S. Constitution and they find that Michigan's law conflicts with it, then they can strike down Michigan's law as unconstitutional. And Michigan has to get rid of that law no matter what because of the Supremacy Clause. So that's how Roe v. Wade comes about. Texas used to have a law that said abortions were illegal in the state of Texas. And so what happened is Roe, her name was like Norma something or other. That was not her real name, Roe. And they went and they said, no, this interferes with my constitutional rights. So the Supreme Court looked in the Constitution and they flipped through the pages and they found something that said abortion is a woman's right. That is part of an interest that we have in the Constitution. Where is that? Does anyone know? Has anybody ever taken a look at the 27 amendments? We only have 27 and they're pretty short. You should look at them. Is anybody interested in the Constitution at all, or just me? Better read it before you don't have it. Citizens that don't read their constitutions lose their constitutions. No one has an idea. Okay. So I'm telling you, you better read them. You'll be sorry one day. You'll remember we had this conversation. So they look in the 14th Amendment and they look in the liberty interest and they say that's part of the liberty interests. Did our framers, did the early fathers that put the 14th Amendment in, that was put in right after the Civil War, were they thinking about abortion when they put that in there? No, of course not. But the Supreme Court reads into what they call the penumbras or the shadows of the Constitution, and they see what may or may not be there. They saw that abortion is within your liberty interest. You have the liberty to control your own body. You have the liberty to determine whether or not you want to give birth. And so they decided, well, then a state cannot pass a law banning abortion because that would be unconstitutional due to the Supremacy Clause. Is this all making sense? It's kind of a convoluted argument. And you're kind of seeing it as like, okay, I like the result maybe, but I don't really get the convoluted argument. Then you would be right. It is a totally convoluted argument. This is how government works in this country. So let me give you an example of how laws work regarding to business. We talked a little bit about last week about the gay wedding cake, didn't we? That Isaiah was gay and he wanted to get married. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, let me tell you how all this pans out for Isaiah this week. So here's the arguments really with that. What Isaiah and his partner were hoping for is they were hoping to make an argument that was made during the 1960s. During the 1960s, there were some very famous civil rights cases. And one of those cases, and you'll probably find this somewhere in a textbook, every textbook mentions this, it's called the Heart of Atlanta Motel case. And it goes along with another case from South Carolina called Katzenbach versus McClung. And these are two really interesting cases that show you some great results, but how convoluted our legal system can be, especially as it relates to business, even though we might, again, really like the result. And I really do like the result on this. Okay, so hard to imagine, but not really that long ago in our country, back in the 60s, which, you know, is like within most of your parents', but at least your grandparents' lifetimes. I wasn't alive then, but my parents were. And, you know, it used to be okay to deny Black people the right to come into your restaurants and to come into your motels and to come into your place of businesses and use the facilities. You all are familiar with this, right? And y'all know it was pretty recent, yes. Right? It was up to the 1960s.
Yes.
Very common. I mean, very common. Black people couldn't use the same dressing rooms. They had different water fountains. They had different bathrooms. And so many restaurants, for example, would say the Black people would either have to eat in a separate section, or that they would have to eat outside, or that they could take the carryout and go eat it at home. So there was a restaurant owner in South Carolina who owned a little barbecue joint. And his policy was that Black people could come to the restaurant, they could get the carry out and leave. They could not sit and eat there. And this was a privately owned business. And you're thinking of that today, and strictly as a business person, you're thinking to yourself, what about this business owner? Never mind that he's a racist ass. We all agree with that. No problem. But what's more important than that for the moment?
From the business perspective, he's missing out on a large population of people who could contribute to his.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, don't I want everybody to sit and eat and leave tips and buy dessert and linger and maybe order something? I mean, I own a restaurant. I don't care if you're purple polka dotted with 3 horns. Just come and buy my stuff. I don't really care. So, but you
I
know,
think too, like if people see like if black people see other black people allowed into the restaurant, then they also think it's okay too. So like, I guess they'll get everyone else coming in.
well, I think the idea was yes, but the idea is that, well, we'll also lose white customers who don't want to eat with black people.
Yeah.
That was part of the decision-making process, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Because there were some people who, for somehow, the enjoyment of their meal was really hinged upon the color of the person sitting at the table next to them. You know, we live here in 2020, and most of us, I know very few people, I've encountered very few people in 20 years of teaching that think like this anymore. But this was very prevalent, you know, back in the 1950s, 1960s. This was a very common way for people to think. And unfortunately, you know, we still have some of this residual racism that carries over, especially amongst older people. Young people, we just don't think like this anymore. And I think of myself as a young person because I just don't have that mindset. But this was the way they were weighing it out. So a black customer sued and said that civil rights legislation, which had been passed by the Congress, said that businesses could not discriminate on the basis of race. And they said that their rights to eat in that restaurant were being discriminated against based on the color of their skin. This ends up going all the way up to the Supreme Court because the state of South Carolina said, no, individual private business owners have the right to determine who comes into their business and who doesn't. And the customer said, that's not fair. I have the right to eat anywhere I want. The Civil Rights Act said so. And I told you all to see if you could figure out where in the Constitution that gets. Did anybody even bother? It's okay if you didn't. Just be honest with me. Don't lie to me. I hate when people lie to me. Nobody bothered. Did anyone care? Did anybody remember past Tuesday that we even had this conversation? Vaguely? Okay. So the Supreme Court thumbs through the Constitution and they come to Article 1. And remember, I told you that there was that list of express powers that is in the Constitution that Congress absolutely has. And one of those powers is that Congress has the power to regulate interstate commerce, which means commerce between the states. And the Supreme Court says, well, if the federal government has the right to regulate business between the states, then they can enforce this civil rights legislation, because if a business owner, a restaurant owner does not allow somebody to eat in his restaurant, he's interfering with interstate commerce. How? How do you think they come up with that? What about your individual private-owned restaurant has to do with business between the states? I mean, we're not talking Crapplebee's, which is in all 50 states. Just think. You won't be wrong. Just think.
Could it be the where they're getting their sources of like food and ingredients and all that.
Yeah. The meat or the vegetables or the flour that they use in their lemon meringue pie probably moved through interstate commerce. The takeout container may have come from another place. The electricity that they use is coming from place to place. All of that. And therefore, Congress has the right to reach down to your private little barbecue shack and say, you have to serve people regardless of the color of their skin. You have to let them come in and eat in your restaurant. It's a great result. I want everybody to eat in the restaurant. Does the reasoning seem a little far-fetched to you? Isaiah, you're being honest and saying, yes, it does seem a little far-fetched.
Yeah, it's a little far-fetched.
I think it's like a huge stretch. Like, really? That's where you came up with that? Because the government can't just pass a law that says be nice to your neighbor. So they have to find something, and they pulled it out of there. I'll tell you about the Heart of Atlanta motel case. It was decided on the same day, and it's a very similar case. So, back before these big chain hotels, it used to be these like little individual private dinky hotels on the side of the highway. And the Heart of Atlanta motel was one of those little private hotels off the highway exit. And they would not let Black people come and take a room because, white people may not want to stay in a room after a Black person stayed there. Who knows? That was the thinking at the time. And so they were sued by Black travelers that said this interferes with the Civil Rights Act and our protections under the Civil Rights Act because we should be allowed to sleep in any hotel that we want to sleep in. And the individual owner of the Heart of Atlanta motel said, no, this is my private business. I own this business. I own this property. And I have the right to accept or reject who I want to stay in my hotel. People used to do this for other reasons, by the way. My grandparents were Jewish, and they were rejected from staying in a motel room in Maine because of their religion. They were asked what religion they were. And when they told them, they weren't allowed to take a motel room. So people routinely and commonly did this in the United States, was determine who could partake of services and who couldn't based upon different tests and qualifications. So, again, the Supreme Court looks at this and looks at the Commerce Clause and says, no, if you have a motel and it's located off of the interstate, you are getting travelers that are going from state to state. And those travelers are doing business. They're buying food, they're spending money, they're using gas, they're using resources. And when you deny a Black person the right to stay in a motel, you are discouraging them from partaking and spending money in interstate commerce. And therefore, even though this is your private individual hotel, you don't have the right to tell Black people they can't stay here. And so that's why Black people can stay at any hotel they want to stay in now. I love the result. Really convoluted reasoning though, right? So then why is it that when Isaiah wants that wedding cake for him and Henry, they
It's Alejandro.
Huh?
We've decided it's Alejandro.
Where's Alejandro?
His fiance.
Alejandro's at home cooking dinner for me. That's who.
Oh, and I didn't know. I was just guessing, honey. I didn't know you were gay. That's awesome.
No, I'm not. But thank you, anyways. I'm not, but I appreciate your. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I meant this in the most loving and supportive way.
Same. Thank you.
Because as you all can tell by now, I don't judge and I really don't care. I really don't. Like, you know, whoever you are, you are. I love all of you. It makes no difference to me. So Isaiah and Alejandro want their wedding cake. And I'm the baker and I'm going, I don't want to make you that wedding cake because I believe that gay marriage is wrong. And you're going, but look at the Heart of Atlanta motel case. And look at the Katzenbach case. Black people can come into your bakery and get a wedding cake for a black couple. What's the difference? What's the difference?
There hasn't been a case yet.
Well, there actually has just been the last couple of years.
What about the religion? What about your religion?
So it's going to hinge on the religion, Debbie. That's the difference. Is now we have another situation because his liberty interest or his right to be protected with the Interstate Commerce Clause, I got to meet this Alejandro. Y'all are just dying laughing here. Is in conflict with mine as the baker's right to my First Amendment, which grants me freedom of religion. And now we've got two constitutional rights that are in conflict. That's where this one becomes different. There is no constitutional right that protects your right to be racist. But there is a constitutional right that protects you from having to go against your religious beliefs. And for some people, the religious beliefs against homosexuality are going to be the thing that case will pivot on. And so that case did go up, Mariah, and what it was determined was that the baker does not have to make the cake for the gay wedding. But he can't stop Isaiah from coming in and purchasing a dozen donuts from his bakery. I can't say, Isaiah, I don't want gay people in my store at all. That's not cool. But if I don't want to make that cake and put a little figurine with two men at the top, I do have that right, if that is my sincerely held religious belief.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What if Isaiah came in and just wanted a regular cake and it wasn't like anything that showed sexuality on it whatsoever? Could you still deny service knowing that he was gay?
No. Nope.
But no, you still don't have to make him the cake, or no?
No, I still have to. I have to make it the cake. If he comes in and he wants birthday cake for his mother.
No. Like, say it's still for the wedding.
But
There's no representation that he's marrying another man on it. It's just like a normal, I guess, but for a wedding cake. But
well, if I didn't know, I probably wouldn't have objected, would I?
You knew it. You know it's for, but there's no representation of like there's no. I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I get what you're saying. It's a wedding cake, but instead of like the topper on the top that's going to have two men, he's going to have some dolphins or something.
Yeah.
If I know, I still don't have to make the cake. That's a good question. That was actually a really good question. If I know what the purpose is for, I don't have to make it.
What's the difference though? Like, what's the difference between the wedding cake with the dolphins and the wedding cake with the two men? Or what's the difference in him buying a regular cake, not wedding cake, and just going? Like, I don't understand the difference. Why is it because it's for the wedding that I can't do it, but if it's not for a wedding, I have to do it?
If he comes into my store and he buys one of my already made cakes off the shelf, and I know he's going to use it for his wedding, I still have to let him buy that cake. But I don't have to use my skill and expertise to create something for him to be used for that purpose. I've already created that cake. And I know this sounds very lame, and I hate to tell you that this is the reason, but here's the reason, because the Supreme Court said so. Because the Supreme Court has made that distinction.
But that can always change in the future, right?
I'm sorry?
That can always change in the future, right?
Y'all know that the 6th conservative justice just got confirmed yesterday, right?
Yeah.
That's not getting that's, honey, that will not be changed in my lifetime and probably not in yours.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was just saying that to my mom this morning. I said, this woman will be on the court until the day I die. And we now have a 6-3 conservative majority. You think that any of these things are going to become more liberal now over the next 30, 40 years? Probably not. And here's the reason why. Because if you don't like what the Supreme Court says, and Peyton, maybe you don't like this. Maybe you feel that the baker should make the cake with the 2 men on it. It's none of his damn business. You're in business to make cakes, right? Maybe that's how you feel. But the Supreme Court made a ruling, and if you don't like what the Supreme Court rules, what can you do about it? Who can you appeal to?
I thought no one. However, you
Right,
can.
Debbie. That's right. God, I guess.
You just try to find another loophole.
There's no loophole. You're done. What can you do?
Vote for someone who shares the same ideals like you.
Beautiful. But the Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. You understand that? So once they're on, they stay there 30, 40 years. Your grandchildren will be born into a conservative court. All the voting you do in the world right now will not change the makeup of the Supreme Court. Does that make sense, Jose? There's ways around it. There's little tricks and things that can be done, but they probably won't be done. And I don't want to sway anybody before the election and tell you what some of those things could be. But in reality, it is what it is. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, the woman, for example, who just got put on is 48 years old. She'll probably live to her late 80s, 40 years. The only way she can be removed is if she does something illegal. She could be impeached. The chance of that happening are slim to none. She's no idiot. She's not going to do something illegal.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, once whatever the Supreme Court says, it's done. It's a done deal. However, just for example, it was mentioned on the news that Michigan, I think, or Wisconsin, there was they were in regards to the mail-in ballots or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought once you submit it to Supreme Court, if it gets shut down, if you take it back, but you figure out another loophole to go around to like try to present it again, is that a possibility?
That is a possibility if the Supreme Court doesn't rule on it. Yeah, if the Supreme Court sends it back to the state, then it's not final, for sure. Here's another thing. The Supreme Court can overrule itself. They usually don't. And that's why I told you last week about the concept of stare decisis. It's not common that the Supreme Court reverses itself, but it can. So, yes, we have cases like Roe v. Wade being the law of the land, or the Katzenbach case being the law of the land. Now, should the same or similar case come up before the Supreme Court again, they can reverse themselves and change things. There's a very famous time that they did that, and it's a great result. Back in the late 1800s, I always forget if it's 1896 or 98, but there was a case called Plessy versus Ferguson. Does anybody remember this from American history? Only one or two of you. Okay. In Plessy versus Ferguson, the railroad in Louisiana was being sued because they would not allow Black people to ride on the same cars as white people on the railroad train. And so the defense that the railroad put up was that, well, the accommodations are separate but equal. And what that means is I have white railroad cars and I have Black railroad cars, but the railroad cars that Black people travel in are not inferior quality. they are at the same quality as the cars the white people travel in. They get the same amenities as the white people would. And therefore, because it's equal, we're not discriminating. That goes all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court of the United States says, yes, separate but equal is fine, as long as it truly is equal. You can provide separate accommodations for Black people and white people. As long as you don't make the accommodations worse for the Black people, that would be something different. But you all didn't grow up with a separate but equal world, did you? Why? Because in 1954, we had another case called Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. Does that sound familiar to anybody? And in that case, Thurgood Marshall, who was an attorney at the time, argued that separate is always going to be a mark of inferiority because of the psychological damage that it does on people for having to be separated and not integrated into the rest of society. And if you go back and you ever look at that school building in Topeka where that case came out of, I went there about 3 years ago. And that school is gorgeous. I mean, it was a Black school, and it was, even by today's standards, remarkable. Just really a wonderful facility, much better than you find, most of the states that we all live in. But here's the thing. Even though the physical building was amazing and they had good teachers, it doesn't matter because psychologically, the Black children who went to that school, they were able to do studies and prove that they felt inferior and they felt somehow worse than their white counterparts because they weren't allowed to go to the white children's school. And they bring this all the way up to the Supreme Court. And of course, the defense is Plessy versus Ferguson. We've been allowed to do separate but equal for years. And on that rare occasion, the Supreme Court turns it around and says, no, we're going to reverse our decision and we are going to get rid of Plessy versus Ferguson and say from now on, separate but equal is not legal. You can't have separate facilities. So that is an unusual case. Great result, but very unusual for the Supreme Court to reverse itself. But it lets you know that the Supreme Court can reverse itself. And so when you think about these other cases and things that have been decided, are they secure? Maybe, maybe not. You don't know. It really depends on who those justices are that are sitting on the bench at the time the case comes up. Questions?
Yes, Professor, I have a question. Who elects the members of the Supreme Court? I know it might be a dumb question.
No, it is not a dumb question. It is a question that most Americans do not have the answer to, okay? Let me tell you how we get the Supreme Court nominees. The President of the United States nominates a judge to be a justice on the Supreme Court. They put that nomination before the Senate, and the Senate votes as to whether or not they want that person on or not. The House of Representatives has nothing to do with it, and the people as a whole have nothing to do with it, except for the fact that we have voted for senator and we have voted for the president. So it's pretty far removed away from the people, right? So we don't vote them on, and we can't vote them off. It's pretty far removed from us. We vote for the senators who confirm. We vote for the slate of electors in the Electoral College who then vote for the president who nominates. We are several steps removed from the justices. That was actually an excellent question.
Does that person that is appointed by the president competes against someone else?
Not
Or it's just
necessarily, no.
him?
No. In other words, technically, no, they can pick anyone they want. I mean, whoever, I mean, he could have picked one of the senators that are a lawyer to be and put their name above. Yeah, no, that is the right of the president and the president alone to make that choice. And it's not like an interview process where, you know, we're going to interview 5 people for the job. The president makes that determination on his own. So those are all really good questions because, you know, I think most people growing up even in this country that go through and take American government, they really don't know that. Most people, I don't think, realize how this process works, how that works. Now, there are things.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
I've been hearing a lot about packing the court, like Democrats or whoever may pack the court. What exactly does that mean?
Okay, so there's nothing in the Constitution that requires there to be 9 justices on the Supreme Court. There used to be 6, then it went to 7, now we have 9. And so the Constitution doesn't provide for a certain number of justices. Packing the court means that a president could add seats to the court. And by adding seats to the court, they could sway the court to go from, let's say we have a 6-3 conservative majority now. Let's say we got a liberal president and he wanted to add 4 seats to the court and make it a 13-seat bench. And then he added 4 liberal seats. Well, then you would have a 7-6 liberal majority. They can do that. They would have to nominate and they would have to get the Senate to confirm. But there's nothing that stops a president from adding or subtracting seats to the court. Does that make sense? And there is no reason to believe that if President Biden, Vice President Biden were to get elected, that he would do that. We've had 9 for so long that most people are accustomed to it being 9, and there's a lot of reluctance to do that, to pack the court. I don't think anybody's threatened that since like one of the Roosevelts. I mean, it's been like a long, long time since anybody's even brought it up. It's a tool. Yeah, I don't think it'll happen, to be honest. What else? See, stuff does change. We have the Bowers v. Hardwick case. That's another one that comes out of Georgia. I didn't tell you about that one, did I? The anal sex case? Oh, you'd have remembered this one. Okay, well, Isaiah, this one's for you. So there used to be this law in Georgia, as there was in many states, making sodomy illegal. And, you know, who thinks about this stuff now? Like, I don't really care what y'all are doing, where, when, how, and with whom. But people cared, and these were actual laws. And in 1986, honey, you cannot stop laughing. You are absolutely going to lose it there.
So Alejandro started as a joke last week, and it just keeps going. So it's just a gift that keeps giving back.
Do I know this, Alejandro?
We made him up.
Oh, we made him up.
I definitely don't. I definitely don't.
All right, baby. I could find a nice boy for you. But anyway. So this used to be a law in Georgia. And so this guy actually got prosecuted. Somebody saw, there was a cop like staking out a house, and they saw this man engaging in sodomy, also known as anal sex. And he got arrested. And this goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. I mean, can you imagine, you know, this is what the kind of stuff that you could be sitting on the Supreme Court and getting cases about this. And he says that it interferes with his liberty interest, his right to do what he wants to do in the privacy of his own home with whomever he wants. And you would think that after we've said okay to abortion now in 1973, we wouldn't really care who's doing what to Mr. Bowers, right? But the Supreme Court did. And they upheld that conviction, and they upheld that law in 1986. Do y'all know why? What was going on in the 1980s that made the court kind of anti-gay?
HIV.
Yeah, we were terrified of HIV in the 1980s because in the 1980s, that was a death sentence, let me tell you. It really was. I mean, I remember going to college in the early 90s, being in high school in the 80s, and oh my God, I mean, the sexual revolution was over. It was scary. You got AIDS, HIV, you were going to have AIDS within 2 years, you were going to die. I mean, that was it. It was an absolute death sentence. It was really scary. So the court upheld that law because they were trying to discourage homosexual behavior, thinking that was the only thing that could lead to the spread of HIV. And it really wasn't until the early 2000s that got overturned. That was another example of the court reversing itself. And now generally those laws are seen as archaic and really is a violation of your constitutional right to privacy. What you do, that's been overturned for the same reason. Because, and again, what happens in the early 2000s that helped the court kind of turn around and make a change? Better treatments. Now there's really good therapeutics and things like that where you can treat HIV as a chronic disease rather than a death sentence. And so we've taken a different position on it as a country where now we're not trying to pass laws to crack down on this sort of thing. So the court can reverse itself. It just typically does not reverse itself. All very fascinating stuff. So as a business owner, this is the environment in which you operate. You may think that you can do whatever you want with whomever you want, you know, but you can't necessarily do that. Sometimes there has to be a case. Let's say that it is my personal religious belief that Black people and white people should not get married. Somehow I think this is a sin against God and I don't want to make that cake. What might happen there? This particular case hasn't gone up. But what you think might happen? What could you argue back and forth?
I think it's gonna be as complicated as the gay one because you're bringing in religion,
Yeah.
which, as you said before, is gonna fight against the laws that are not religious. So it's gonna be kind of the same, I guess, outcome. I don't know.
I don't know, because then the argument's going to be, what religion, is that your legitimate religious belief, or are you using that as an excuse to mask your racism?
Yeah, and then it's hard to see because, as you said last class, I think there's many religions as types of shoes. I don't know, like, you know, people keep up religion, so that's when it comes to the hard part to determine if there's an actual religion or you're just making it up, or, you know. I guess that's going to be the hard part to prove.
That's always the difficulty when you deal with those religious cases. Is that someone's sincerely held belief, or are they just saying that and using it as an excuse? It's really hard to know. The court has some tests for it, but it's really tough. It's really tough to know what somebody believes or what they don't. And sometimes the court doesn't care even if it is your religious belief. They won't let you do everything that your religion promotes or allows, you know. Just because something goes along with your religion does not mean it's always a slam dunk. You know that? So if you believe that it's part of your religion to smoke pot to get closer to God, or use hallucinogenics to get closer to God, and that is part of your sincerely held belief, but the laws in your state say, here in the fine state of Georgia, we're good people, we don't smoke pot. Well, you're not necessarily going to win that case. In fact, you won't win that case. I guarantee you won't win that case, because a case like that, a similar case, has been decided out of Oregon. If the state has a law prohibiting things like that, the Supreme Court will look and say, well, the state has an overall arching interest in protecting the health, safety, and welfare. And just because you say it's my religion does not mean it's always a freebie for you. So that's an interesting way to look at the world. So questions on any of this? I mean, this is the kind of stuff I think is really fascinating. Like I do. I think this is the kind of stuff that's interesting because it really shows you how much power the Supreme Court has in the United States. I mean, if you don't really see, there's supposed to be 3 co-equal branches, but if you really don't see the Supreme Court as being the most powerful branch, you should. You should really rethink what we've talked about today, because the Supreme Court has the power to determine if the actions of the other 2 branches is constitutional or not, and that is known as judicial review. That is a doctrine known as judicial review. And the Supreme Court has that power of judicial review to shut down something the president did or to shut down something the Congress does. But who can shut down what the Supreme Court does?
No one.
That's it. That's it,
I
Debbie.
agree with you. I agree with you. This is fascinating.
And I don't think people really understand that the Supreme Court, though is supposed to be co-equal, it's not. It's really not. Because they are not elected. Remember, the president's got a limited term. He can only be in there for a certain amount of time. The House of Representatives, those guys are up every 2 years. You know that? The reps only have a 2-year term. So every 2 years, they're accountable to the voters. A senator, every 6 years. These people are there for life. So it makes a big difference. You really do have to pay attention and be aware and really care who your Supreme Court justices are. It really does matter for the issues that you care about. Okay. I'm going to take attendance. Let me tell you what we're doing. Oh, before we do this, let me tell you what your discussion questions are. So there's 2 this week. There's one dealing with business ethics. You've got a pregnant employee who's been missing a lot of work. I want you to write to me about her. For your second discussion questions, you're going to love how I do this kind of stuff. So your second one this week is actually going to be you submitting your topic for your paper, which is going to be on employment law. See how I've like double dipped for you to not make extra work? Because I get that you're all doing 3 million other things. I get it. So you're going to love this. So you got to give me your topic. It's got to be on something to do with employment law. If you're fascinated by things like civil rights and employment law, sexual harassment, gender equality, things like that, feel free to explore any of those things too, because I think the constitutional things are interesting. I mean, maybe you're fascinated by OSHA and why we have to wear closed-toe shoes to work sometimes, but I think there's things that are way more interesting than that. So you come up with whatever you want to come up with. So you're going to go ahead and do that. I want you to kind of research a little bit, make sure you can find some information on your topic. Wikipedia doesn't count. So you're going to find some academic sources. Let me tell you what I would consider to be an academic source. Reputable newspapers, Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, Fox News, Huffington Post, things like that. Books, magazines like Time, Foreign Affairs. You have to be careful, Foreign Affairs online. I forget, whenever you have to know which one it is. You got to put in Foreign Affairs magazine, because if you just put in Foreign Affairs, it comes up as a porno site. We found that out the hard way here, trying to help my son with a project in high school. Legitimate things like that. Yes, you laugh, but I know these things only because we've been bitten in the butt by it, all right? So, Foreign Affairs magazine is a good one. Certain commentators are more reputable than others. I don't want to hear from Rush Limbaugh. Don't give me that he's not an authority on something. But a real constitutional authority, I would have said Jeff Toobin, but what he just did last week, I don't know if we can listen to what he says anymore. But he's a constitutional lawyer. So something like that, you can use them as resources. So you're doing that. So that we have that. So I decided that it's going to be a 7 to 10 page paper, no more than 10. So that's double spaced. If it's more than 10, I'm not going to read beyond the 10th page, because there's 20 of you and that's a lot of reading for me. And I don't expect them to be written that well, and I'll get tired.
10 including like cover page, table of contents.
Honey, there won't be a
graphic-
cover page. You're not in 4th grade anymore.
I mean, that's how my
page?
paper has been for years. So,
Huh?
like, you know, like table of contents.
No, but not for a 7 to 10 page paper. Do you do that really?
Yeah.
Well, they asked me to do it.
We had to
yeah.
do it for the last class this
PA
semester.
format. It's awful.
But that's okay if you don't want us to do it, because I'm fine with not doing it. From this.
Done for a paper that short. I mean, if I was going to have you do that, it would be a 25 to 40 page paper.
That's what I was asking. Yeah.
No, that's dumb. No, we're not going to do that. You are going to have a works cited. I'd like 5 works cited. They need to be in APA format. But that's it. No. You know, for your font, just use something I can read. Like Times New Roman or something, Arial, something normal. Don't do like an old English font, you know, that's going to require me to like, what the hell are you writing there? Don't do that. It's stupid. But you know, just be normal about it. Just be normal. You know, don't be weird and try to be creative with script or something. You know, just write a normal font and something.
Does the 10 page include the works cited page?
No, I mean, if you
Or
want
they
10
can
pages,
have it.
put the works cited, go ahead, knock yourself out, Debbie.
My last question is, when we submit it in the discussion, are we submitting it as a discussion or attaching it as a Word document?
No, just go ahead and do it as the discussion. It's just quicker and easier for me to grade that way. Especially because
Okay.
I use a Mac and most of you submit it in Word, then I've got to export it and it's a big pain. I'd rather just open it in discussion and look at it that way.
Thank you.
It saves time and I can get back to you much faster that way. Because if you notice, I do grade pretty fast, so I'll get back to you really quick. Anything else for
Well,
today?
wait, so
Oh, go
said-
ahead.
I'm sorry. You said the paper is going to be submitted as a discussion board?
No.
That's
The
what you said?
paper will be submitted as an assignment through
Oh,
Turn It In,
okay.
but the topic will be you know how you do
Yeah.
2 a week for me? Your second one this week is the topic.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
Yeah, just to try to make this go, you know, a little quicker and easier and not give you extra busy work to do. I'm trying not to do that. Because the more
So you
busy
said
work
the
I give you, the
topic-
more grading I have.
All right, so you said the topic and also you had said give a short thesis as well?
Yes, right. You know, what are you trying to say? Because you're not writing me a report. You're not going to write a report on like the history of civil rights and employment law. You can't write that in 7-10 pages. That's like a doctoral thesis, you know? So what specific thing are you interested in? Kind of find something narrow that you can research in a couple pages. You can't do like a whole big, you know, thing. You know, if you're talking about sexual harassment, you know, be specific, maybe, you know, talk about discriminations maybe against gays or transsexuals in the workplace, you know, something real specific like that. You're not gonna be able to cram in all sexual harassment or all sexual discrimination in like a 7 to 10 page paper. I mean, that's a lot. Yeah. Yeah, Isaiah?
Okay, so let's just say, for instance, I want to talk about child labor laws.
Yeah, that's
Could I, and if I wanted, like, is that too broad? Is that specific enough?
no, that's really broad. I mean, what specifically would you want to talk about?
Overseas child labor laws, for instance.
Okay.
Okay. So what would I talk about? The history, like what would the paper consist of? The history of it.
I would find maybe 1 to 3 specific countries and talk about the labor laws there and maybe the ethics of whether or not we should be importing products into our stream of commerce when from companies that are knowingly using child labor. I mean, granted, they can, you know, those little kids have nimble fingers, they can work fast, but do we really want to have clothing sewn by 8-year-olds in sweatshops?
Right. I mean, I did a research project on Nike last semester, and like one of the things that I referenced in there was talking about how you know, one of their kind of ethical bugaboos was that they like used a lot of overseas like overseas cheap labor and stuff like that. And I was like literally typing about it. I was like, I feel like I could do a whole paper just on this. And so,
Good.
so anyways, I just didn't know if like that, if that is kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah, do it just on Nike.
Okay.
I mean, you could do it just on Nike and you know, discuss where they have most of their factories and production, which I think is Asia probably. Am I right?
Right.
Because the laws are pretty liberal there. Yeah, I think that's fascinating. But I
Okay.
mean, you can't do like on the history of child labor, period. Because I mean, what are you going to do? Take it back to the Industrial Revolution in Europe and the United States? I mean, good luck.
Not in 7 pages.
Not 7 pages, you're not. Now I'm going to stop reading after 10. So, you know.
All right. That sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Anything else, guys? All right. Sometimes I know y'all can't make it to class. I know Veronia, I acknowledged I had a couple of people write to me today. They couldn't make it. I'm going to record these. I have tried with all my might to get these to upload into Canvas, and I can't. So I have a little YouTube page, which I swore I would never do, but I will upload it to the YouTube page and I will send y'all the link. And then it tells me how many people viewed it and all. You're not required to view it, okay? It's just if you're absent and you need to view it, then you have to. I cannot imagine, I don't view it again. I do not want to sit through this multiple times. So I can't imagine why you would want to do that. But like, if you're not going to make it to class, if you're traveling for business, if you know, your dog threw up in the morning, you couldn't come, whatever, I will upload those to that YouTube and I'll send you all the link, okay? I'll usually put it on an announcement and I'll send it to you guys. Is that good? Veronia, did that answer your question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was trying to get off mute. Yes, and
That's
thank
okay.
you.
Yeah, just so you know, so that's the easiest way to do it. I don't know what it is, but somehow I just cannot get it uploaded to Canvas. It'll get like 60% of the way and the whole thing
Okay.
just kind of implodes on me. But so
Okay, well, that'd be appreciated, and then I can just go on the YouTube link and look at it.
okay, I just wanted to let you know, don't look for it on Canvas. Canvas. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
I just don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if it's me or them or I don't know. Just we're doing it the way I do it because it's working. So
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
you're welcome. Does anybody else have anything before I take attendance real quick for the day? Okay, I'm going to take us off record.